Hey guys,
Hola.
welcome. Mike, you want to do the intro?
Yeah. All right. Hey guys. So we got a really exciting one here today. So, we figured with everything going on, everybody's kind of quarantined in their homes, and we're seeing a lot of stuff that none of us, our age, our generation, even our parents, haven't really ever seen before. So we got on one of our our teammates, our professors, Reggie Orr. A lot of you guys from the gym will know who he is, one of the black belts out of Millennia. But more importantly, he's got a huge knowledge when it comes to surviving. When it comes to survival, he's considered a survivalist, and he's spent a lot of time studying it. So we're going to talk about like what that entails, what it means, and if what is going on right now, how that could possibly lead to a situation where you'd have to know this stuff. So, Reggie, how you doing, bro?
Good, sir. How are you, my friend?
Doing great.
Got your audio working?
Yeah. Technology is not why I'm part of this podcast.
I know, right? Yeah, so I guess everyone listening to this, we are doing this via Skype.
Yep.
Yeah.
A little bit social distancing. Hey, Josiah, did Mike tell you how I had like a whole thing worked out? Like I didn't know we were gonna do it via Skype or whatever, and I was gonna basically make like a makeshift biosuit.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
I was a little bummed out when you guys said we're doing it via Skype.
That would have been great. It's funny though. Our cords for our mics are stupid long. So I was actually thinking it'd be super funny because they're like 6 feet each. So you could set the device in the center of us, and then we could be
that'd have been awesome.
12 feet apart from each other.
They're way longer than 6 feet too, by the way. Things are like 5 feet, I think. They're so long. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. That would have been funny too.
Yeah.
Oh man.
But all right. Well, so Reggie, I know that one of the things that we had kind of talked about having to do with survival was preparedness. How big of a factor does that come into the overall spectrum of survival?
So as far as preparedness and survival, I guess there's two schools of thought on everything. Everyone's kind of used to the whole idea of prepping or seeing that and seeing doomsday preppers, and it's kind of gained a little bit more of attention over the last few years. I think largely in part due to that show, but some of it has kind of been negative. I think the more the prepping mindset is a good place to start for most people. You're just getting into being a little bit more self-sufficient or whatever. Most of us don't have hunting backgrounds, or like Josiah was telling us before we started recording. His dad basically left him and his brother out in the woods for like 2 days where he grew up in Minnesota. Like, hey man, this is the way of life, And I can most certainly say that wasn't anything that I ever had any experience, growing up with a single mom or anything like that. So I made like a little outline, and it's good you asked that question. Prepping, in my mind anyway, equals more of a temporary Band-Aid solution. You just got some things at home, some food, some water, maybe being able to shelter in place, some basic first aid stuff, things like that. And survival is more of a long-term road warrior situation, right? That's kind of how I look at the whole thing as far as where I'm going to start and what the two differences are. Yeah, so prepping is kind of like essentially what we got going on right now for most people. I think a little bit more people are turning on to it now with this whole quarantine thing. And again, survival is like long-term, like what Josiah's dad did. Here's a can of beans, here's a knife, there's a creek about a mile that way.
Yeah.
I'll be back in 48 hours. You know what I mean? So, and having the skills to, basically, and the knowledge to essentially be ready for the lights not to come back on. So that's kind of the differences between those two.
And when I say preparedness too, what I had in my head was not actually thinking about prepping. I'm thinking preparedness in the sense of having done something like that, like stuck in the woods for 2 days, or like refining your skills, learning the skills that you would have to need for stuff like that. And like how, it's easy for the normal person, let's say 2 months ago to think they have no need to learn anything like that? How would you go about motivating somebody to understand that these are things they need to learn?
I think this podcast is one of them, right? As you know, I used to have social media and stuff like that, and this was something anyone that had me on social media I was always trying to throw that stuff out there, being ready, getting ready, and on like social media and stuff like that, you just get lost in the noise. No one's really gonna want to scroll past what Reggie's talking about. He's always talking about that or whatever. So like for me, my family and I started off again like with the prepping solution all the way up into recently went to survival school. Not recent, like 2 years ago, went to a 5-day survival course in Colorado. Cripple Creek, Colorado was the actual city, 9,400 feet above sea level. What was it? Colorado Mountain Man Survival School. It was a 5-day course. Every day you're going to learn something, and they kind of learn it in the order of importance, so, shelter, water, food, you're going to learn it in a specific order, and a lot of different skills, building shelters, finding water. My woman made a frog spear, learned how to make some other things like glue out of some pine sap. And just because that stuff can come in very handy also for like bandaging wounds and stuff, because the pine needles have like a antimicrobial property to them. Learned all kinds of stuff, and that's kind of where we took our stuff. Just going from the preparation, having some stuff at home on hand, all the way up until I was like, hey, what if for whatever reason where I'm at becomes compromised, my home becomes compromised, or we become refugees in some kind of a situation. People thinking that we might not have a warlike situation on our soil is just, to me, it's very, very, very possible, right? Improbable. It's probably not. It's not probable, I don't think, but very, very possible. So getting those skills is probably where one would eventually lead to. But for the basic person getting started today, that didn't really think about any of this until the quarantine happened, they're going to want to have their mind oriented around just being ready to shelter in place at home, survival at home. How is that going to look? And then once you get that established, then you can move on to the more advanced things, like getting the skills. Luckily for me in my profession, I have the medical skills, being a paramedic. My fiance is a nurse. Then I started getting into comms. Okay, how am I going to communicate? What am I, if the grid goes down? Well, I went and got my ham radio license, so I have ham radios and stuff like that. So, it'll take you through a natural progression of skills eventually, but you most certainly want to start off with just the basics at home.
Yeah, the thing I really like about what you're saying is it's kind of a family thing, It can be fun. Me and Hannah personally split up tasks like you and your wife do. Like certain things where I'm like, I have no interest in that, and I'm not going to, like, you have all the fun with that, like gardening, and Hannah does a lot of creating cultures and herbalism and things like that, whereas I'm more hunting and those kind of skills, so we kind of divide them up. But something I also was thinking about with what you were saying is you said at home. I think most people don't realize there's several classes of survival. You're going to have desert survival, you have urban survival, you have like wood survival like you did. Like they're very different environments, and none of them are the same. Right. None of the tools you use are the same within there's some universal ones, but generally it's a completely different class. So if you're going to learn it, you have to learn from where you are and where you're planning on going during 100%. The situation.
Yep. And that's another thing too. So like I went to Colorado Mountain Man Survival simply because it was like the only one I was most likely aware of at the time. But even researching for this podcast, just trying to give people, like you just said, a little bit easier. Who wants to drive to Colorado to get those skills? That's just another barrier added for most people. But they have, let me scroll down here on to the end of my little outline I made here. This is just some resources, and one of them is, here we go, California Survival School. Their website, for anybody listening, is californiasurvivaltraining.com. So again, that's californiasurvivaltraining.com. and they're located right here in California. And what I really liked about what they had to offer, obviously, one, this is our area of operation, right? So we're here in California, so gonna definitely want to be learning the skills that you might be applying if you ended up living off the grid or whatever in a refugee type situation. But they have like 3-day intensive courses, which is what I really liked. What I'm looking into is to get into survival edibles, or I don't want to say edible people. You know what I mean, Californians. I'm talking like edible plants and stuff like that. They have little like 3-day courses where you can go out there, learn the edible plants that are native to our region, stuff like that. And they have a bunch of different ones too. But again, they're like just 3 days, 2 days, 1 day, land navigation, things like that. So most certainly that's a school that I'm going to be looking to go to pretty soon here again and try to expand on my knowledge of edible plants and stuff like that. I was looking at that. That was interesting.
So 2 things. Are these places, these things, are they like, could a novice go do these? Is it like friendly for a novice?
Yeah, 100%. I would say most of their classes are going to be for the novice.
Okay.
Like I mean, you're going to have people of varying experiences in these classes, but the ones I was looking at for myself were for beginners. Like I consider myself a beginner in all of this stuff. It's kind of like jujitsu. You know what I mean? Like if you're a blue belt in jujitsu, you're way ahead of the remainder of the population. Yeah. But you're comparing yourself to the standard within your community of jujitsu players. So yeah, you're a blue belt. You're ahead of the game as far as everybody else, as far as self-defense. But then you go with a guy like Steven. Yeah, you realize how much more you got to learn. So that's kind of where I am in this whole game. It's like, I've been doing this for like 8 years, and I'm like at most a blue belt and all this stuff. You know what I mean? Head of the game for sure. When this whole quarantine thing happened, my family and I did not panic at all. We didn't have to go stand in any long lines to get any of the things that we needed, and we were pretty much ready to go. And kind of like I told you, you know what I mean? Something like happened. So. I think most of their classes, probably the vast majority of their classes, are going to be centered around people who are just trying to get into this. Especially now, I would be willing to bet over the next few months, once hopefully things go back to normal, that they'll probably be adding more classes for people to get involved.
Definitely spike up in the demand for it. And this is probably what we should have started with is really just like talk to us. I want you to like, if you had to go onto a podcast hypothetically and talk about survivalism, what would you say as your opening statement? You know what I mean? What would you say about it?
Let me see. Let me open this up. Wrong way. I'm not very technically savvy, guys, so bear with your boy. Here we go. I'm not gonna be able to see your pretty face anymore. Yeah. So just some of the things I would want to outline again is some of the misconceptions about prepping versus survival, which we kind of already outlined. Prepping, I would say, is where most people should probably begin their journey, if they do indeed get involved in this journey. And that's kind of why I wanted to be on here today, is to hopefully spread that message, get people thinking about this. So again, prepping is going to be more the short term, having stuff just in case, things aren't normal, right? Kind of like what we're dealing with right now. Survival is going to be the long-term road warrior situation. My whole philosophy, like I told you on the text message when we set this all up, is I like to think of it as being hard to kill. You know what I mean? Not that I'm some, Van Damme or Bruce Lee or anything like that, but most certainly I'm trying to always make myself hard to kill. Everything from my self-defense, being strong, being fit, trying to eat right as much as you can. And then all the way up into the skills that I've learned. That way, if anything happens, I have at least some tools, because, preparation prevents panic. You know what I mean? So that's something people always have to remember. Preparation prevents panic. So if I find myself in a situation, whether my plan that I thought was going to work in a particular scenario, the simple fact that I have a plan to focus on, that in and of itself is going to increase my odds of surviving any situation. So one of the biggest things too that I have listed here right off the bat is when people start looking into this stuff, and again, hopefully they do, and they get online and they start going to websites and blogs and this, that, and the other thing, you'll see that unfortunately there's a big push in this community for people to bug out. be ready to go out and get and hop in your car and be ready to go live off the grid. That is a 100% romanticized, unrealistic approach. Especially like you asked about novice people. The last thing you want is someone that bought some gear and put it in a quote unquote bug out bag. They have zero skills, and at the first sign of trouble, they're trying to run to their local mountains. They're going to find themselves in a very bad situation. Where we live right now in the Inland Empire, everyone knows we have people dying right here in these mountains almost every year. I mean, just this last year, we had a guy go missing, right? Just slid off, and then a search and rescue guy looking for that guy died. And that brings me to my own personal experience also. Not being prepared. Rick McCorkle is probably one of the first people to really introduce me to like going hiking and getting involved in all that stuff. And I legitimately almost died out there going hiking unprepared, wearing tennis shoes. We were going, I believe we were going up to the Cucamonga Peak. We hit a little patch of snow, and my big old heavy self, the little patch of snow broke out from underneath me. And before I knew it, I was sliding so fast down that hill, and I reached out and grabbed this sapling that just so happened to be there. And I tell you what, man, if I would have been 3 more inches to my left or whatever, I wouldn't have been able to reach that sapling, and I wouldn't even be sitting here. So just even little stuff like that. The whole prepping community there's a lot of misconceptions about what prepping is, thanks to doomsday preppers. Also, just being prepared in that sense. Whenever I go hiking now, I have a first aid kit, I have some water, I have at least a day's worth of rations, and I'm wearing the proper shoes, right? Because I'm not going to be out there in my tennis shoes and slipping down a mountain, So it's just, being prepared in that sense as well. So again, just too much focus on like bugging out and romanticizing it in that sense. Your first option when you get involved in this, I would say to be ready to shelter in place. How much food and water do I need to have on hand? Be prepared to bug out only if your home becomes uninhabitable, due to, earthquake, fire, flood, civil unrest, diminished supplies. Maybe your supplies that you did have now have become diminished and there's no way to restock. That's when you should be trying to worry about bugging out, Again, and I only bring this to the forefront because when people start getting into this and looking into this, they're going to see that there's a big emphasis on that. So if you got civil unrest or something like that where you're trying to bug in your home and it becomes unsafe, then that's when you should consider leaving your home. But until then, you should be ready to sit there and defend yourself, prepare and be ready for that. So again, first option should be shelter in place.
I think a lot of people, when they think about that, they think about themselves and their family. That's
right.
The first thing they think about, which is understandable. But the reality is you can't learn everything for this kind of situation, and you're going to need a community. Exactly. And, if you don't have friends that, survival skills or are going to be useful in this situation, talk to your neighbors,
right.
Like a lot of people are like, oh, they're going to become my enemy. No, if you create a community like that makes you stronger, A lot of people try to do this themselves and only think about themselves rather than a community plan.
Right. And that again, that's the thing too. We call them, or in our community, call mutual aid groups, essentially. So yeah, like you said, not having all the skills, you're not going to have all the skills on your own, and you cannot learn all those skills on your own. So definitely having some type of, again, mutual aid group, people that are like-minded. And unfortunately for me, this is something I've actually really tried, to develop more connections and stuff like that. And it's been pretty frustrating over the last 8 years because people just ain't trying to hear it. You start talking prepping, getting ready. I've had friends tell me flat out, well, why do I need, and this, I've had people tell me this more than once, why would I need to prepare? I could just come to your house. And it's like, everything I do, the time, money, energy spent into this is calculating my family, like you just talked about. When I say I have 3 days worth of food and water, that's 3 days for me, my stepdaughter, my daughter, and my woman, not for Yuri and your kids who didn't prepare. And, and again, like survival, right? We talked about survival. Some things and some people will and will not survive. And when I say things, some relationships won't survive, right? Because if somebody that you loved before the shit hit the fan comes to your house because they know you're prepared and they put absolutely no time and energy into preparing, that's a relationship that's not going to survive because you're going to have to turn them away, and unfortunately, you're going to possibly have to turn them away with a level of hostility. Because if people are coming hungry, desperate, you know, that's where we're at. So, I've literally had people tell me that to my face. I ain't gonna throw any names out there. But, I've had people
Don't say my name, bro. Don't say my name.
Yeah, my,
Yeah, for the people that I really trust and I know, I have a list, and I told them personally, like, hey, this is my plan in this situation. I trust you. I know what you can do and what you have. Like, I know that you're not a liability. You, like, come to this point,
right.
Um, yes, I have told you, Mike. If you're thinking, Mike's like, wait, am I in that? Yes, I've told you.
Something that Jordan Peterson always says that applies to this, and I really believe it, is that both of us dead isn't better than one of us dead.
Right.
Really, pretty much what it comes down to. Like, you got to make those decisions, and people will be like, oh, I can't believe you're gonna do this to me. I'm like, well, bro, like, you're gonna kill both of us, or
Right.
you're gonna kill one of us. Does it make you feel better if I die with you, or
Maybe.
Yeah,
you're right. I like that. It's very true.
Hey, what would you? So let's say in a situation where the government deems it one day out of the year where no laws and murder.
Oh, like purge?
He's literally just.
No, I don't know what the purge is. I've never seen that.
Don't get me too excited.
He's got his list ready.
You have a list for purge too.
Yeah,
names on there.
Most of my purge list is illegal thanks to California law, but we're not talking about that. Speaking of that, did you see? Oh man, I don't want to get started going off of rabbit holes here, but did you see how in New York they had the Empire State Building looking like a giant siren, and it was playing the purge siren?
No.
See that?
No way.
No.
Oh, I swear to God, dude, I had to send you that guy's video, man. And I mean, I was tripping out. That's the kind of thing that would have had me in my body armor and my underwear ready to roll. That going off in my neighborhood, bro. What is going on right now? People weren't very happy about that.
That's funny. Okay, so so in a situation that we're in right now, right? California, we're in quarantine until they say April 30th, but we're all kind of expecting it to go a little bit longer than that. So how close are we to a situation where you need to know full-blown survival, and how much for what type of things would need to happen to where the people who aren't prepared, aside from being able to get groceries, where they're going to be kind of fucked and they're bit in their ass?
Well, I don't know how close we are. By my estimation, we're a lot closer than I would like to be. Like here in my house, we have a kind of a little standard color scheme. My woman understands it as well. Green is kind of, you're hanging out, nothing really going on. Then you have, yellow. You should always kind of be in a state of yellow, orange, and then red. We're kind of at the higher end of the orange, in my opinion, as far as the way we look at it as a prepper family. We're very close to potential civil unrest. I've been reading some stuff, trying to get an idea of what the supply lines are like for the food and stuff, like how long are the trucks going to still be running. Some of the news sources that I gather my news from had some truckers and stuff like that call in and basically say they're having trouble getting loads. The few of the trucks have been running lately, really quite a bit. Again, this is kind of outside my wheelhouse because I'm not a trucker or anything like that. I don't own a transport company. One of our fighters do. I'm not going to put his name out there, but you know him. We all know him. Yeah. That was smart enough to invest some of his money into, a transport company. And I asked Rick the other day, hey, reach out to him. And I know his drivers have been kind of busy, but that being said, that was the initial spike from all the panic buying. From what I've heard from a few of these truckers and a little bit of my own personal research online, that has dropped by about 39% now. So things are kind of slowing down. Our economy is not meant to have everything on complete lockdown. So I don't know where exactly we are as far as civil unrest, things like that. It all depends on how the media, how America is going to handle this. When you look at certain news outlets, there's a lot of fear mongering going on. and then other news outlets think this whole thing is a big hoax. So to see how close we are, I really don't know. One of my biggest concerns though right now, again, and I'm not here to be doom and gloom by any stretch of the imagination, and I also don't want to get too politicized, because unfortunately this has been politicized, which sucks. I simply just want my fellow Americans and friends and family, especially this podcast, people that listen to it, I know and I love. So I want them to start thinking about their own self-reliance. But one of the things I read this morning, I think the article got released yesterday, it was on the Daily Mail. Basically, China has admitted that this virus is a man-made virus based on research that they were conducting. Yeah, and this is something I've been talking about since it started, right? Is this thing's man-made? I've been, looking at some of the news sources that I get my news from, but now it's in the Daily Mail. You could Google it right now, and you would see that there are some articles talking about that, how basically the way it worked out in the year 2015, the University of North Carolina kind of was able to make a breakthrough in doing some experimentation with the gain of function of coronavirus, making it more transmissible. There was a stop put to that, saying, hey, we can't be messing with that. And then they basically outsourced the technology or the knowledge, however you want to look at it, as well as gave $3.7 million to that Wuhan lab in order to continue that research while Dr. Fauci was heading all this. My point being is China just released that. China is kind of hedging its bet, saying, hey, this is what happened. Yeah, we made that virus, and it was from these bats that we were studying, and this is how we did it. And we got a lot of money from your government. I think that can cause, and to answer your question long-winded, that in and of itself, that little bit of news can cause, in my opinion, a potential hot war between ourselves and China, right? We're already at war with China right now. People, if you guys don't think that, then, I guess this episode isn't for you. We're already at war. We are the admitted enemy of China. They admit this, and this is part of their attack on us. I think whether it was a release by accident or they did it on purpose, they most certainly are capitalizing on it, on our weakness. They've subverted us in many different ways. This is just one way, what's the next thing, right? What if, the technology exists to an EMP attack, right? That technology exists. China has the ability to do that. We have the ability to do that. Setting off a nuclear weapon right above Kansas, essentially in outer space, knocking out our whole grid.
Hey, EMP is
electric magnetic pulse.
Okay, so that shuts off electric voice device.
Yeah. So basically, when they had nuclear weapons, first tested nuclear weapons, they noticed the phenomenon of an electric magnetic pulse knocking out electric grids outside the blast zone. Things weren't even affected by the blast, but all the electronics were fried. Well, that's a technology that 100% exists. Pretty much, I would imagine any nation that has a nuclear weapon and the ability to travel to space has the ability to launch an EMP on their enemies. So again, that's a doom and gloom scenario. That's the scenario I'm preparing for. Is that the scenario that I only prepare for? Absolutely not. I also prepare for my house to burn down. That's why I have fire extinguishers. You know what I mean? So I just try to look at the world like that. I think, though, with that latest news with China it's kind of a shot across the bow of China kind of hedging its bet, saying, yeah, we did it, but so did some of your criminal elements within your United States government. And my fear is to cover all that and for people to cover their bases. And when I say people, I mean criminal elements within our government. They might push us toward a hot war or something worse. Again, not to get too conspiratorial, but Trump has been going around rounding up pedophiles and really taking it to the global sex trafficking ring. That's probably the primary reason why I voted for him. He ran on that. Since he's been in office, he has arrested more sex traffickers and pedophiles than any other president in history. You can look that up. That's a fact. Right when Hillary was about to get indicted, the New York Police Department has her server right before she gets about to get indicted. And all these people are getting busted, the Jeffrey Epsteins and the Kevin Spaceys and all that. We had this big coronavirus thing. So my whole fear is, one, that whenever we start to gain some traction as far as being an informed public, the criminal elements within our government are willing to do something bigger to try and disrupt the natural progression of ourselves getting educated on those issues. So I feel like, you know, they have they have kind of a motto that they go by: never let a crisis go to waste, right? So whether they create the crisis or an actual crisis happens, they're most certainly going to exploit it, and it's not going to be for our best interest. So that's where I kind of think we're at right now. I just see a lot of craziness going on, and I obviously have no crystal ball, but I just right now we just live in some very uncertain times, and you know the whole entire country, all 50 states are in declared emergency right now. If this doesn't wake people up to the potential, it's still kind of honeymoon stage. I've been telling my girl, we're in honeymoon stage. People are getting into this, wearing their little masks and their little stylish masks and thinking they look like Bane. And oh, it's, you know, it's really cute, you know, and it's like, all right, bro, you know, right? People is having fun with it, man. I have a buddy that sent me a picture of him in his little stylish mask, and I was so irritated.
Dude, I have one, like, there was a person who put a picture up on Instagram and it was a Bane mask, and I was just like,
Oh God.
yeah, it's a Halloween costume. Like, it doesn't really work, bro.
Yeah, we're in the honeymoon stage right now, man. People can still get their food. People's lights are still on. You know, you can still go to Starbucks. Uh, in fact, I have on my phone again. So I thought we were gonna do this. I do like to do my own little on the ground investigating. I went out to Krispy Kreme, and there was a line about a half-mile long.
Oh, I heard of that, bro.
Like, that's the priority in America.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's where we're at. And I'll admit, I went out to go get myself a donut. But when I saw that line, I wasn't about to hop in that line. And what tripped me out the most is people just driving right on in. Just let me hop in this half-mile line. Like,
yeah.
It's worth it.
Yeah, so, Reggie was like, I'm going to go get a donut. And then he saw it. And then he was like, well, this is an experiment now. I wasn't going to.
It is, yeah. This is investigating.
For me, when I look at prepping myself, I'm not like, I don't know, always believe the absolute worst thing can happen. Like, I think more often than not, most people would prefer to not get to that point. But be prepared for the worst and hope the best.
Exactly.
You know, for 100%. Me, so I don't think about like whether China did it or the United States or anything like that. Right. The thing that honestly during this time that makes me more concerned is other people's behavior.
Right.
It's not even that, you know, supply lines. It's like the stocks, right? If people believe the stock market is going to fail, more people pull their money out, and then the stock market does. It's all about, you know, belief. You know, it's about information. It's about how people process that information and then how they react to it. For me, I'm more concerned that our human nature of me, specifically in America, that ideology is the part that concerns me. Is people getting to a point where they're like, nope, I got to get mine. Screw you. Yes. And that's the part that scares me. That's what makes me prep more than anything else. Is not the actual like
the cause.
The cause of it. The thing it's other humans overreacting, or like you said, not being prepared, so they have to rush and get all this stuff so that they start and feel safe. When it's like, if you just prepared and you just had this stuff in the beginning, you'd be like, oh shit, okay, I guess I gotta hunker down. I'll be okay.
Right.
You know.
Exactly. Prepping prevents panic. You know, I always try, you know, remember that. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And, you know, that's why even when I try to have these conversations and I don't get into all my little conspiratorial beliefs or whatever you want to call it, at the end of the day, like I was telling you, Mike, before you were able to get your stuff working, Josiah asked me how did I get involved in all this. And my very first exposure to it was when I took my very first fire science class 10 years ago to try to become a firefighter. And they just literally talked about, hey, you should have a little bit of food and water on hand, you know, for an emergency, right? So we live in Southern California. An earthquake can devastate our region, legit, you know, to where there's not going to be any power, there won't be any water, sanitation, you know, an earthquake, very real natural disaster, irrespective of what caused that particular, you know, tragedy. If it was a large scale earthquake, but like Josiah alluded to, what are people's behaviors going to be like in that situation, especially if they're not prepared? It will be panic. So that's kind of, again, it's very easy. And that's what's always kind of frustrating me too, is even when I try to bring it from that angle, like, hey, let's not even talk about current events. Let's talk about earthquakes here in Southern California. People still don't want to hear me And I've had a very hard time getting people on board, so I could have mutual aids groups, have friends and stuff. I have a few. I have about 4 people. That's it. And to me, it's way too little considering how long I've been involved in this, trying to spread the word. You know what I mean? My best friend Anthony is probably my right hand man. He doesn't live too far from this, from me, and he's the only person I really have to rely on that lives locally right now. Hopefully, you guys are now going to be part of that. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I'd be interested in talking about that for sure.
For sure, yeah.
No,
exactly.
One of the things is, so we're all interested in different things, right? And like, so for me, the interest is like Josiah, like the behavior of the people, but also like the mindset of the people, which is hand in hand with their behavior. But it's like two people can be presented with the exact same situation, right? Somebody who's prepared, somebody who's not, and like you said, if you're not prepared, you're gonna be panicked. Right. But even presenting people with like what the real issue is, even presenting people with a realistic situation like an earthquake that could happen, a lot of people don't even like to entertain the thought of that possibility. They would rather they hear it, they go, I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole because it's going to make me feel bad. I don't want to feel bad right now. I'd rather just live like it's never going to happen and then figure it out then. It's like newsflash. Then when you're not going to figure it out when it happens because you're not preparing yourself for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of people just don't think that these things are possible, but like my grandmother had to escape Germany, like it's 2 generations away that some crazy genocide happened. And I knew Hmong and Cambodian friends growing up, and they had to go through it. It's like people think that it's so far because they lived the majority of their life in a safe environment that it can't happen to us, of becoming a refugee or needing survival. And it's this false facade that we all carry. And I understand, we are less likely than most countries to deal with this. But why take the chance of your entire life? It's like, it's a gamble. It's like, oh, I guess I'll be fine. It's that gamble that I just think is just stupid. It's not something that you need to like risk.
Right.
And for like even just $30-$40 for something super basic, or even, if you want to get a little bit more crazy, $200, it's for an investment of your life. It's not that much money to like be like kind of prepared for like a crazy situation.
Exactly. And I mean, that was one of the first things I did. Again, I was in college still, very poor at the time. I think I was working at Buca de Beppo, as a wait assistant.
I remember
those days. Yeah.
Fucking days, working it as a server.
Yeah, man. Good times. And, my woman and I we got like $30-$40, went to the 99-cent store and bought, $40 or whatever it was worth of canned goods. Just, hey, it was only probably like a 10-day supply or whatever of food, but that was like our start, and now we have some more stuff, right? Not, we're still not ready just to be sitting here all day, for the rest of our lives, like living like kings if something bad happened. But we're most certainly ahead of the game. And like Josiah said, it doesn't take a lot to get started or to just make it a priority, and to chip away at it bit by bit. It's like eating an elephant, one bite at a time, So this podcast, I hope, is like that first step or that seed being planted for people. Like, oh, you know what? Coupled with this deluge watering of that seed with the quarantine, right? People seeing like, hey, I'm lucky, man. Like so I'm lucky the fact that like every time I go to Costco, it's, just to get some staples, like some little things or whatever, like what I need to get the other day, some greens or whatever to make our green smoothies and stuff. And the freaking line is wrapped around the building still. People still out there, panic buying and stuff. And luckily they let first responders up first, so I was like, screw it, man. I showed them my ID and got in right away and left right away. Thank God for that. Because I wasn't about to sit in line for freaking an hour just to get a bag of spinach. You know what I mean? Like, but again, people, if they were prepared, they wouldn't have to have all that panic buying. And I hope this really shows people that, our supply lines, we have our just-in-time service, or what they want to call it, just in time, basically, meaning that we only stock our grocery stores with enough food and water for a few days. You know what I mean? That we have a very complex, fragile supply chain system, which any little small disruption on the demand side or the supply side or the manufacturing side of any of these products can really have detrimental effects on our ability to get goods and services. And we're kind of seeing that right now, barely. Again, we're in the honeymoon stage. Lights are on. People can still go to the store. You know, I could walk across the street to 7-Eleven right now. You know, not a big deal. But it's, you know, I just hope it sheds a little light on what can potentially happen.
So if there was like one thing that somebody wanted to start purchasing, and two-part question, one skill and one item that they should grab right now to like just start, what would that skill and what would that item be?
So I would say the skill, and again, people can read and get hundreds of different opinions. I think probably the best skill for now would be some type of stop the bleed class, CPR class, something like that. You know, some kind of medical skill. Do something like that. People, again, because the whole prepping is not just about civil unrest, grid going down. It's about what are we most likely to encounter. Let's get prepared for that. I'm most likely to encounter someone being injured or myself being injured. So getting some type of going to stop the bleed class, CPR class, that'd be a good place to start as far as skill sets are concerned. What was the second part of the question?
An item.
An item. A firearm. Most certainly. I would say get yourself a firearm. Again, you can't eat a firearm, but if you chose to get here's why I say a firearm, because let's say you do get all the food and water. Let's say you do get all the food and water. You probably saw where my mind was going to go with that one. You got to go. No, I'm kidding. But if you have a firearm, or excuse me, if you have a bunch of food and water and stuff like that, you don't have a means to defend yourself, then your stuff just becomes my stuff. You know what I'm saying? So at any given time, people probably have a little bit of food and water on hand, right? And again, it's pretty easy, not easy, but even now, a little more difficult than normal to get those things, but you can still get those things. Having a means to defend yourself, because again, what's most likely to happen? It's not a bioweapon, which, you know, or whatever, a pandemic, which is where we're at now, right? A pandemic. That wasn't the most likely scenario for most people up until a few weeks ago. What was the most likely scenario? A home invader, an intruder, you know, someone coming into your home unwelcomed. Those are daily occurrences in our country that people don't worry about, but they can, I mean, everybody, maybe you guys have seen this. We're all involved in the MMA world. Recently, Anthony Smith had an intruder. You guys hear about that?
Yep.
Right? So yeah, UFC 205-pounder, top 10 guy, had a home intruder. His wife said, hey, I think someone's in the house. Anthony wakes up to find this maniac in his kitchen screaming at the top of his lungs. The guy wasn't armed. Long story short, Anthony gets into a fight with this guy. These guys are fighting, and it became a long, bloody fight, which that's another thing. Just because you're a trained fighter doesn't mean you're going to be mentally prepared for a street fight situation. That's why all my jiu-jitsu and stuff, I don't get into all the flashy crap. I get into what's going to work in a fight situation. Keep it fundamental, keep it basic. He was pounding this guy, couldn't put this guy away. I don't know why he didn't choke the guy. You know what I mean? But he eventually got a knife. His mother-in-law got a knife for him. Anthony puts the knife to the guy and says, is anybody else with you? And the guy says, yes. And then Anthony starts having trouble controlling him because he's trying to hold the knife and hold the guy. So he puts the knife down to try to further. I would have stabbed that guy. I'm telling you right now. And you would have been legally within your right. Hey, why did you stab him? Because I was having trouble controlling him. He's in my house unwelcome, and he said there's an intruder, right? That's when the metal, or there's another guy with him. That's when the metal that's where the metal meets the meat. I would have plunged that knife into his neck or into his liver or something like that, and I would have started looking for the next guy. But that's what you have to do. Why did Anthony go into a panic and couldn't even apply his regular fighting skills? Because he wasn't prepared. Even though he prepared physically, right? He's a big 205er. He wasn't mentally prepared. You got to war game this stuff. What are you going to do if this happens? What are you going to do if that happens? I do that with my fiance occasionally. Hey, what would you do if this happened? You know, I show her videos. Again, guys, another resource that I was going to mention that I like to watch every single morning, active self-protection channel, attitude skills plan, right? Having a way to protect yourself, active self-protection. So make sure you subscribe to that YouTube channel. And they show all kinds of instances where people were involved in all kinds of stuff, from dog attacks to car accidents to getting robbed. But they break everything down, kind of like Henry Gracie does the Gracie breakdowns. He breaks it down from a self-defense application, you know, being aware of what's going on, stuff like that. So that's what I would say: a firearm and some medical skills. You know,
there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to self-defense. We all know it, but I mean, tasers is a great example. Most people think like, oh, I'm completely safe if I have a taser, you know,
right?
Or I'll just knife fight a guy. It's like these things aren't realities. You know, one of the guys that I like to follow for this kind of specific self-defense is Tim Kennedy.
Oh yes.
That man is like no nonsense jujitsu. I don't know if I could even handle his classes. Like he trains like legit eye gouges and, you know, nut strikes and like real self-defense stuff. Right. I'm just like, fuck.
And for the people listening, if you're not aware what Josiah's talking about, Tim Kennedy, he runs Sheepdog Response. So he has classes as well, Sheepdog Response. He has intensive carbine classes where you learn how to use your rifle in tactical fighting situations, like Josiah just talked about, self-defense classes where you're learning how to actually street fight with potential weapons being involved, things like that. So yeah, Sheepdog Response is another place where you can get some real training to build upon the skills. That's kind of where Tim Kennedy's at. But yeah, firearm and medical training would probably be the first area I would start. And the reason why I say firearms again is here's a silver lining to all this too. Everything is getting politicized. You have the environmentalists on the left, right? And then you have, we'll say, the gun owner on the right, conservative, however they want to look at it. Well, right now you have a lot of first-time gun buyers that went down to local gun stores and could not get themselves a firearm. People who had no idea how the whole process worked, had no desire to buy a gun up until this point. And now that they see that we have criminals being released on one hand for fear of coronavirus, right? Low-level offenders, air quotes, and gun stores were being shut down. And even when the gun stores weren't shut down, people couldn't get guns because people were buying them up. I think that the silver lining in that is the fact that we can bring these two factions, if you want to call it that, of people together. You know, you got, again, the people on the environmentalist side who care about global warming and all that, and you got the conservative gun owner. And the reason why I bring up the environmentalists is because there's a lot of indications that we might have long-term food disruptions globally. And that's not necessarily by design, but that's because most recently, we've all heard of Monsanto, right? Everyone's aware of Monsanto. Well, Monsanto just merged with Bayer. So now we have about 70% of the global seed production now in the hands of only 4 corporations. It was 5 until Monsanto got bought by Bayer, and Bayer literally is, you know, they are a globalist cabal if you ever saw one, right? I mean, they are big pharma. They have patents on seeds. So my point is, you know, you have all these scientists and everything that are, and I'm one of those guys. I believe in the global warming thing, right? I believe that climate change is real and we need to do something about it. I read a thing the other day where most of these scientists who have the general consensus that if we don't do anything about this global warming issue by the year 2050, we're going to be in a big world of hurt. A lot of them are actually wanting to discontinue their work and only join and start getting involved in preparing themselves for what the inevitable is. It's because it's so politically divided now. They don't even want to, they're like, you know what? I don't even want to study this stuff anymore. I'm just going to freaking start getting ready. So my point being is, if you're a person that is a liberal, fun, you know, green loving environmentalist, right? And then you also have these conservative people over here, gun owners, who think that this whole global warming thing is a hoax, right? It ain't a hoax. And that, I think the firearms is an area where people can start coming together, and not just the firearms, but just
firearms brings us together.
Because it really should, if you really look at it, because, you know, again, you got people who never thought about buying a gun in their life. We're like, holy crap, you know, I think I need to get a firearm with this whole pandemic thing. So I think the whole prepping, people getting involved in prepping, can bring a lot of us together, and then we can collaborate on how we should all solve bigger, more complex issues. but we have to find common threads. You know what I mean? And I think being prepared, self-sufficient Americans is a good way to start.
What gun would you recommend if somebody decided to start this process? I know there's a lot of debate about what your first gun should be.
Yeah.
I have my personal preference, but what are your thoughts?
I would probably go with the first gun I got, probably a shotgun. A shotgun being because they're easy to use once you get a little bit of training. They're cheap. I got my shotgun at Big Five for $209. It's a pump action Mossberg Maverick 88. It's still my primary home defense weapon, despite all the other rifles and stuff that I have. I would say definitely a shotgun because it also fires several different loads. You got, 12 gauge buckshot, or excuse me, you have buckshot, double aught buck, bird shot, slugs, combination slug, buckshot. They have all kinds of stuff out there now.
Yeah, so great hunting rifle, great hunting weapon, and good defense as well.
Exactly, 100%, exactly. So I think a shotgun would probably be the best first gun option. And in the survival stuff, there's like a rules of threes. You have, 3 hours without shelter, three days without water, 3 weeks without food. You can also apply that to the rule of threes for firearms: long range, short range, and mid range. Shotgun being mid range, short range being your pistol, and long range being your rifles. So you can also kind of apply that to the firearms department. But I'd recommend getting a shotgun because it's so versatile, so reliable, easy to use, and cheap. Again, Mossberg Maverick 88, pump action, holds 7 shots, 7 rounds, and I got mine, and they're still about $200 at Big Five. So that's where I would go with that for sure.
I went out to this was back in like November, December. I don't know if you remember, Josiah, when we had somebody get into our backyard, and
oh snap.
Yeah, so and then so pretty much like we live in like a back house, and our front door is in the backyard pretty much. So somebody came to the backyard, hopped the fence, knocked on the door, our dog barked, they took off. But since then I've been like, okay, it's time for us to get a gun, And I went to Turner's, and they talked me out of the shotgun and into a pistol.
Yeah. A pistol, what kind of pistol? Pistol's going to cost you a lot more
That's probably why.
Yeah. And I can tell you right now, in my journey to being trained, my friend Jeremy Bennett, Jay Bennett, some of you probably know Jay, combat veteran. He works now. He's done a lot of like executive protection for security companies overseas and things like that. But now he's a firearms. Jay, I'm sure.
You guys fought each other, didn't you?
No, I never fought Jay.
I thought you did.
Yeah, no, Jay's my boy. But he's a firearms instructor for Glock and teaches pistol classes for law enforcement, military, and all that stuff now. And I tell you what, man, him being my sensei and all that, shooting a pistol takes a lot of skills, a lot of dedication, and it's pretty hard, So a shotgun's a lot easier to manage, I mean, again, everyone has their opinion. Yeah. It's unfortunate they directed you in that way because I would have put a shotgun in your hands for a lot less money.
It's like, well, it kind of like threw me for a loop. I was like, what? Like, I'm going in there naive, and I'm kind of leaving like my guidance up to this guy. You know what I mean? But everybody's told me like a shotgun's the way to go. I go in, he goes in, and it kind of like I was like, that's why I haven't got one yet, because I'm like, well, I don't really know what the right course of action is here. You know?
Yeah.
Mossberg, Remington. Yeah.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm going to kind of backtrack a little bit, but one of the things where we were talking about, like, climate change and then, guns and just how it's divided on that. I think it's like a lot of people seem to have a hard time accepting what is, and they wish for things to be different, right? So it's like, look, we live in a world where guns exist.
Right.
You not having one isn't going to make it a better place. It's just going to make you more unsafe. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, the climate is changing. Like, that's the way it is. Like, you ignoring it's not going to change it either. Like, that's just the way it is, and you've got to do something about it. Like, it's just the way it is. And I think like, people are just, when things are a certain way, they just wish it was another way, and then it just makes them more unhappy about it as instead of just accepting and deciding how they're going to maneuver within that world, which is, however way it is.
Exactly. It's a lot easier to, especially, and here's my thing, and for people who, have a problem with firearms or whatever, most people that have a problem with firearms are good people, obviously. They don't like violence. They don't want people getting hurt or whatever. Well, it's a hell of a lot easier to get a gun put in the hands of a good person than it is to get the gun out of the hands of the bad people, for sure.
There's way more people than bad people, So
yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so we, you and I, we had a lot of years where we were training for fights and fucking training really hard, and MMA was the way to go. And then, I know both of us kind of now are transitioning to just jiu-jitsu. Yeah. I know you hurt your knee, and when you came back, it was kind of like out of the cards to continue fighting. But we talked a lot about firearms, but how big of a role does you training jiu-jitsu play in your survival? And how big of a role did survival, the mentality of survival, have on you honing into just jiu-jitsu instead of everything else?
So the role that it plays now is a pretty big role. And luckily for, like you said, we're a bit ahead of the game. So just doing maintenance training is good for us now because we've been on the mat for so long or whatever. But as far as it being part of my survival, I'm very thankful for all the years that we spent training and fighting, because I do have the ability to defend myself. Am I on the elite level like Tatiana or Lorenz or anything like that? Nope, never have been, never will be. But I'm very, very glad that But I'm very glad that I know how to fight. I've been directing my jiu-jitsu more toward, when I'm training, more toward like the Gracie combatives type stuff. You know what I mean? Where they're dealing in the Gracie survival tactics, where they're dealing with armed attackers and what you're going to most likely encounter in a street fight. I'm not very interested in the sporting aspect of jiu-jitsu. Henry Gracie does an excellent video on it where one of his blue belts got his ass beat in a street fight. Well, how'd that happen? Because he had no concept of self-defense. All he had was how to score points in a jiu-jitsu tournament. And I know that's, controversial. People are going to run their businesses and their gyms the way they want to run them. But there is a huge market of people out there that really want that self-defense. They want to know that walking away with a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, that they're capable of handling a much bigger, stronger opponent than themselves in a street fight situation. I think Lauren Hunter is a perfect example of that. She started her whole journey with the pink belt course, trying to empower herself as a woman and going through the Gracie combatives, I guess you want to call it, women's empowerment course, and got her pink belt. So that's kind of where my jiu-jitsu has kind of where I keep my mind when I'm thinking about rolling. Even when I'm just rolling at the gym, I'm thinking about, can I get hit from a position? Can I hit from a position? Can I block getting hit from a position? And if it's some type of fancy move that I know would just get me wrecked in a fight, or it's just not going to work because of hard surfaces like concrete and stuff like that, then probably going to steer away from it.
So you're only focusing on barambolas right now as well.
Oh, that's, man. My head's so big. I try to barambolo, bro. My whole occipital lobe gets stuck. I can't do it.
See the Reggie Orr barambolo instructional coming out.
No, yeah, there's no way. So, but it definitely plays a very big role. And again, never did my mind think that way, like you said, because we were just fighting. But now I look back at it, I'm like, damn, God has blessed me with being able to have these skills, and it's not something I have to think about. Really, most people, that's something they got to think about. They're like, check, got to write that down. I got to start learning how to fight, because again, that's part of your journey of being hard to kill, essentially.
Yeah, I think also something that goes into that whole situation with training, because we're all relatively about the same size and weight. Like a lot of people are, they don't want to go. They're like, oh, I'm going to be light so I can. It's a tournament mindset. They want to be lighter so they're the bigger guy in tournaments. But in real life situations, like, you don't want to be the tiny guy. Even if you do know self-defense. Like you said, that preparedness of like knowing real life situations and weight is important as well.
Right, and also de-escalation. Right. That's something I was never really good at. Definitely not going to incriminate myself today. But most certainly not de-escalating is something I've most certainly have gotten really good at over the last 10 years. I've had several situations where I was really proud of myself after the fact, just being able to walk away and be confident with who I am, and be like, that's all good. When, 8 years ago, we'll leave it up to people's imagination. But, that's another thing too that is not being preached enough in our martial arts academies and stuff like that. Is de-escalation. De-escalate. Use your verbal jiu-jitsu to try and get yourself out of these situations. Because again, active self-protection channel, guys. Go to active self-protection channel. They post a video every single day in the morning at about 6 a.m. They're usually about 5 minutes long, and it will put you off it'll put you on the right mental path to cover your ass throughout the rest of the day. I see people getting shot for the dumbest things. They showed one the other day, a guy got shot in LA. They were dancing. One guy stepped on the other guy's toes, became a little pushing, shoving match right here in LA. Guy pulls a gun out, shoots the other guy. You know what I mean? I mean, and not even just freaking if you're the guy getting shot, but man, this guy pulled a gun out in the middle of a bar. So that's another thing he talks about in active self-protection is the four rules of stupid. Don't be out at stupid times, at stupid places, doing stupid things, right? If you're in a bar with a bunch of drunk people, you're already violating 2 of the rules of stupid. Stupid place, stupid people, doing stupid things, drinking. You can usually get away with violating 1 or 2 of the rules, but you can't violate all of them and expect a good outcome. So that's just an example of some stuff he talks about. Again, that's all part of the prepping mentality, avoiding situations, staying out of stupid areas, just being ready for any kind of little contingency or whatever.
Yeah, dude, a couple of the things that I like that you really said, or I really like that you said, not that you really said them, but was about, being unprepared is going to lead to panic, and that just being hard to kill. I think that's a great thing for people that it's not about, I think if you think about surviving and all the things that you need to learn, it can be kind of overwhelming. But if you just think about being hard to kill,
yes.
that's easy. That's an easy goal to achieve and to work towards.
Yes. And I think part of that too, and I don't think this is as important for the people. I don't know how many people you guys get listening to your podcast. I certainly tune in every time you upload. So I hope you guys are getting a lot of people, but I would imagine most of our people are fellow martial artists. Yeah. So they kind of got the health thing on lock. But that's something I wrote here too, as far as, your priorities. Here it is. I have the basics here. Build a solid health foundation. Again, and I put in red, be hard to kill. Be healthy. You got people who, and this is a big problem. And again, if people start getting into this via this podcast, they're going to see there's a lot of fat, out of shape dudes, conservative dudes, with their tobacco. I'm a stereotype because I've seen it. I've been involved with these people, thinking that they're going to rise to the occasion when shit hits the fan. No, you're not. You know what I mean? You got to have your skills. You got to have your gear. You got to, go hiking. I do this all the time. Hiking with your gear, being able to hump, because if you're on foot, people don't realize just going for a long walk is go for a long walk, go on a 3 or 4 mile walk, and you'll see, even if guys are in shape, are gonna be like, whoo, that takes a little out of you. So people, strong health in mind. And the reason why we talk about health too, I think, again, being prepared. Look at the current situation we're in right now. I think New York just recently posted that obesity is the #1 comorbidity that's having the unfavorable outcomes. New York scientists, NYU scientists, largest U.S. study of COVID-19 finds obesity the single biggest chronic factor in New York City's hospitalizations. Doctors at the Langone Health Center conducted the largest study so far of U.S. hospital admissions for COVID-19 focused on New York City. They found obesity, along with age, was the biggest deciding factor in hospital admissions, which may suggest the role of hyperinflammatory reactions that can happen with those diseases. So, obesity leads to all kinds of stuff, right? It leads to hypertension or high blood pressure. It leads to pre-diabetes and diabetes, et cetera, heart failure, diabetic neuropathy. I mean, the list goes on, right? So this is a perfect situation of if part of your preparation is to be healthy, Well, during this particular shit hits the fan type of event that we're in with this pandemic, you're already hard to kill. You already got your health unlocked. You two gentlemen absolutely don't have to worry about that. And most of the people listening to us. But again, that's why it's number one on my list as far as basics that I put down as far as getting into this is being hard to kill just physically.
Yeah, I know, Mike, you've been on a Jordan Peterson kick, but his rules book, one of the things is like that he talks about is community. Like if you're obese and you're having that issue, like you need to change up your community, because more than likely you're surrounded by other people who have those similar behaviors and thoughts. Right. Like being around people who are fit, who are active, who want to go hiking, who want to be prepared, like that's a big part of it as well,
100%.
Yeah, dude, we all know how the media works, and yesterday I got this alert, and it said that this 21-year-old woman from Riverside died of coronavirus. She was working in a nursing home, and then I clicked the link, and this girl is very heavy, right?
Yep.
I went to the point where it was like she would have had to work hard for those 21 years to be the size that she was, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But she was still able to work and stuff, but it's fucked up. But I was like, oh, okay, well, there's always a reason why there's an outlier, right? Everybody's like, oh, it's killing somebody who's in their 20s. I'm like, well, they weren't fucking, you know what I mean? Yeah. Other risk factors.
And that's another thing where and I'll admit this, I got a little salty and pissed off with all this social distancing stuff. I get it, but I don't like the fact that the people who, and I don't want to sound callous, but we're going to talk for the sake of reality so people can get this through their heads. I don't like the fact that I'm somebody like yourself and Josiah, and most of the people listening to this work hard to be healthy. We train, we work out, we try to watch what we put in our bodies. We experience the discomfort in the gym so we can have the freedom of being fit. I don't like my freedoms being taken away from me to protect people who don't give a damn about their health. I don't feel sorry for you if you're 400 or 500 pounds at the age of 21 and you died of COVID-19. You just met your inevitable fate. You were going to die at your own hand regardless. So don't sit here and, make me have to wear a mask. I can't sit with my buddy Mike and my buddy Josiah, who are perfectly healthy human beings, because, we're protecting some invisible person out there, or whatever. So that's where I kind of had a little bit of an attitude about it. It's just like, all these people that are going to be at highest risk, they haven't gave a damn about their health in a very long time. So I think that's something that should be considered. People should look at that and say, let's start taking care of ourselves. Most of the people that are listening to this most likely aren't in that they aren't in that category. But if you know someone that is, sometimes it's kind of like dealing with a heroin addict. Sometimes tough love is the best love. And this is the kind of situation where beating around the bush is not going to help anybody. You got to tell somebody, hey, you're fat, you're sloth, you're gluttonous, you're lazy. It's time to stop that crap. You know what I mean? Because, 1 in 3 people is obese in our country.
Yeah.
So we're locking it down for all these people? I guess so. But I want to see them make efforts on their side. That's what I would hope to see. But sorry to get all salty on that one.
No, it's fine. We've talked about it before, both me and Mike, just your sense of self-responsibility. After you're 18, and, I might argue a little younger, but after you're 18, it's not your parents' problem anymore. If you grew up in that environment, that situation, we all have shit that, we grew up with that we have to undo, that were bad behaviors, So if you're going to say that you grew up in that environment where, that's why you're overweight, it's your responsibility now. You can't blame your parents, you can't blame anyone else. If you're overweight, it's on you. And I hope anyone who is listening to this doesn't think that we're, banging on them. Oh, it's blurred. It's blurred.
You got that
Low forward.
No, put it in front of your face. Put it in front of your face.
There we go.
Oh, no.
You got the fucking.
He's got the blur on. What is it? What book is it?
Discipline Equals Freedom. Phil Manual by Jocko.
Jocko, I knew it was Jocko.
I think it might be blur on my freaking camera because before this Skype, I actually had a piece of tape over my camera.
No, Skype has a feature where they blur your background for you. You have to turn it off.
You look great. You look great. No, you know what? So this is something I really fundamentally believe very strongly. It's kind of the thing that keeps me going is that I believe that comfort and discomfort are always going to equal each other out. So it's whether if you had a life of comfort, which, this girl who passed away, she did, right? She had 21 years of comfort. Now she's going to have the ultimate discomfort of dying in the way that she did, or passing away. But it's or you could go through an hour of discomfort every day and then live in a life of comfort every time outside of that. So you have the opportunity to dictate that when it comes, when that discomfortability comes and when the comfort comes. And secret is when you get to decide to go into discomfort, it's a lot better than when you make the decision to do it.
Yes, I will agree with you 100%. That's a perfect way of putting it.
Yeah, 100%. Benjamin Franklin used to do this crazy thing. He would spend some time as a homeless person.
Who did that?
Benjamin Franklin.
No kidding.
And he did it because,
Josiah does from time to time too.
I've thought about it, but I haven't done it. But it's impressive, to be able to choose that, to find those moments where it's I've done this, fear mapping and just being no, I in the worst kind of situations I can still survive,
Right.
But on top of that, it's the discomfort, right? It's being willing to sit in that discomfort and be okay. But yeah.
Hey, dude. Is there anything left that you didn't get to? You want to talk about?
So just a quick basics list, just so people have a quick way to start. Again, there's 6 things I listed here. Build a solid health foundation. Be hard to kill. Get your home ready for 2 weeks of self-reliance. 3, be able to leave your home with only a moment's notice. So bug out bags. There's a bunch of resources. I'll list some resources here at the end of this little list. Prepare for emergencies that happen away from home. Get home bags, meaning a bag you have in your car, something like that. I keep a bag in my car with about a day's worth of rations, some ways to make fire, some wet weather gear, warm weather gear, and a first aid kit, and a radio to communicate with my family. Learn core skills and practice with your gear. Survival school, ham radio, CPR, stop the bleed, practicing with your bartering as well. We didn't get into bartering or anything like that. And again, like Josiah talked about, share and recruit while continuing to learn and going beyond the basics. One more thing I wanted to talk about, if people start getting into this, don't get into the doomsday depression even now. Doomsday depression is something I went through, so it's very real. Where I started getting into all this, kind of getting a feeling of hopelessness because the way our world is going with all the corruption and the division along party lines and things like that. I literally almost got a vasectomy because I didn't want to bring a kid into this world. Literally went down, talked to a doctor, was going to get a vasectomy, didn't do it. And now I have a 5-month-old daughter. Ironically, all this crap is happening. But, so that's something just, again, preparation prevents panic. Also, the 80-20 rule, focus on the 80% of the likely scenario. So that's why I said CPR. Mike Flock listed 2 stories that he had, one where someone got into his backyard, hence why you should have a firearm. And I also mentioned learning CPR. Well, Mike also has another story that he didn't allude to where he literally saved a man's life at the gym because he was ready to do some CPR on the guy. So those are 2 scenarios that Mike has already experienced that he was, one of them he was ready for, the CPR, one he didn't have a firearm for the other guy, but we're gonna remedy that. Also, the Department of Homeland Security previously would suggest 72 hours of food. Currently, it's 2 weeks recommended. Red Cross recommends a 3-day supply for evacuation. So if you do have to leave your house, have at least 3 days of food, and a 2-week supply for shelter in place. So think about that. Something else to consider, guys. And I'm just listing all this for the essence of time. Washington State, go ahead and Google this. The Washington State 2016 Cascadia Rising Exercise After Action Report. In 2016, the United States Navy, Coast Guard, and Washington State's National Guard did a full-scale 9-day drill to test how well they could respond to a massive earthquake in the Cascadia subsection zone. That area covers Vancouver, Seattle, Portland, and up through Northern California. The 83-page report comes to a lot of scary conclusions. The authors admit that the systems are not ready, infrastructure will collapse, and they'd have a full-blown humanitarian crisis within 10 days. So you can actually read that. My own personal experience working as an EMT before I became a paramedic, an American Medical Response a couple years ago, we had a situation called what we were calling Flu-mageddon, just a regular flu season. ERs were overrun. We literally, as an ambulance agency, were promising same-day service, meaning we'd get to you within 12 hours if you call 911. Wow. So think about that. I experienced that being part of the first responder community. So I have a home checklist summary that, I won't get into it, but it's just basically water, food, fire, lighting, shelter, medical, hygiene, communication, power, tools, self-defense, getting some cash and tobacco and things like that, even if you don't smoke, for barter, all kinds of stuff. So that's basically it. And then just for some skills and training, here's some resources. Colorado Mountain Man Survival School, the survivaluniversity.com. We also have California Survival School for www.californiasurvivaltraining.com. You also have
Hey, Reggie.
Yes.
For these resources, we can put them in all. If you want to email them to me, rather than have to list them up, we'll put them in the blog. If anybody really wants to go for that, yeah. We do a blog, and I think because we have video, we'll put this one on YouTube as well for people, and then it'll be audio as well. So
for that.
If anybody has any questions and want to talk to me or become, link up so we can start prepping together and talk, build that community. My email is ironsurvival1@gmail.com. So you just shoot me an email and we can talk about stuff. And yeah, I'll send you this little document that I have here.
Perfect.
Oh man, this was awesome. This was one of the best episodes we had in a long time, man.
We got to get you a gun, bro.
I already have my text ready to send you after this is done.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
But we really appreciate it, bro. Like this is just perfect timing. I know this is something that Josiah was really excited to talk about. We had talked about it before. We kind of went on a little hiatus, but it's just like everything's happening. It's like perfect timing. No time better to go over this and get it out there. So we really appreciate you giving your knowledge, being humble about the knowledge that you know and don't know, and giving people places where they can look up and start their own journey. So this is really cool.
Yeah, I second that.
Appreciate you guys. Love you guys. Thanks for having me on, and I can't wait till we can get back so I can kiss both you bearded men. Get back to a social distancing.
Floppy ass.
All right. See you guys.
All right, see you guys.